Soft jazz mixed with the clinking of glasses and laughter, creating a lavish harmony in the heart of Chicago's most luxurious hotel. The sparkling crystal chandeliers cast shadows on the gorgeous costumes, making the autumn air artificially enchanting. This was supposed to be a memorable evening, an occasion to celebrate love, to share happiness. But for me, an investigative journalist, my sister Lily's engagement party was no different than a glamorous play where I was just a spectator on the sidelines, with no lines, no role. I'm Emily Carter, Tharatir 34. Despite winning numerous prestigious journalism awards, I've always felt like an outsider in my own family. My mother, Olivia, and my father, Daniel, seem to have only one center in their little universe: Lily. My younger sister, a social media star with millions of fans, has always been the center of attention. Today's party was even more remarkable. Lily appeared in a custom-made wedding dress, holding hands with Ethan, a handsome and successful tech entrepreneur. They looked like they had stepped out of a modern fairy tale, so perfect that all eyes were drawn to them. I stood huddled in a corner of the room, a glass of red wine in my hand, trying to blend into the crowd, but the feeling of isolation clung to me like a cloak that could not be removed. The praise for Lily rang in my ears like a chilling refrain. Lily is gorgeous. She has the charisma of a movie star, a golden couple of the tech world. I smiled awkwardly, my eyes following my sister, who was shining in the midst of the whirlwind of praise. Meanwhile, my efforts, the months of tirelessly exposing the truth, the shocking investigative articles, were like a faint smoke no one bothered to mention. My mother, Olivia, seemed to have a special talent for making me feel like I was never enough. The comparisons were getting deeper and deeper into me. Why aren't you as gentle as Lily? Lily connects with people more naturally than you do. Each sentence was like a sharp knife, silently carving into my heart the question, am I really a member of this family, or just a shadow next to my sister's dazzling halo? The climax of my humiliation came when my mother, in her solemn speech at the party, suddenly mentioned me, not with words of love, but with a disguised insult as reconciliation. And Emily, she has overcome the misunderstandings of the past, the wrongs she caused Lily with her lies. The room was dead silent. The glass in my hand shook so much that the red liquid almost spilled out. I stood rooted to the spot. Lies? Hurting Lily? I had never done that. Her words were like an electric shock that shot through my heart, awakening all my senses, making my face hot, embarrassed, and resentful. I looked at Lily. She was looking back at me, her eyes filled with pity. And maybe a little triumph? No way. I must have imagined it. After all, she was my sister, but my mother's words kept echoing in my head like an echo from the bottom of a deep well. Why did she choose to humiliate me in front of hundreds of people on such a solemn occasion? Was there some secret between Lily and me that I never knew? A truth hidden behind the perfect photos and flowery words? An uneasy feeling began to stir in my mind, as if beneath the shimmering light was a cold, broken layer of stone. What my mother said, was it the truth? Or was there another version of the story, a hidden part of my life that I had never been exposed to? The glass of wine in my hand, already tasteless, suddenly carried a bitter aftertaste, like this party itself. Beautiful on the outside, but rotten on the inside. After my mother's cryptic speech at Lily's engagement party, memories of my childhood suddenly came flooding back, as clear as a curtain of dust. I grew up in a quiet suburb of Chicago, in a small house where every corner seemed to be marked by Lily. A little girl with honey blonde hair, big, sparkling eyes, and a smile so bright that it made everyone around her stop for a moment every time they saw her. From her earliest years, my mother, Olivia, had praised Lily for her natural beauty and innate grace. Lily, she is a little angel. With just one look, she can make the whole room quiet. As for me, Emily, despite always striving to excel in my studies and extracurricular activities, all my efforts seemed to pale in my mother's eyes, like weak rays of light swallowed by the brilliant halo surrounding Lily. I still vividly remember the times I brought home certificates of merit, first-place certificates from school-level and city-level journalism competitions, my heart filled with hope, only to receive a cold nod from my mother and a dry reminder. Yeah, good. But will those side jobs affect your main studies? Don't neglect them. The investigative articles I had sweated and cried over were labeled as part-time jobs, while Lily's first short videos, recording her making tea or applying makeup, were praised by my mother as a budding media genius, a natural-born social media star. The words my mother said that day still echo in my mind, like deep engravings in stone, unbreakable by time. Why aren't you as quick-witted as Lily? Lily speaks gracefully while you are stiff and dry. Look at Lily. She always knows how to shine. Each of those words, perhaps my mother didn't mean to hurt, but they cut into my heart, instilling in me the belief that I would never be good enough, never be something worthy of my mother's pride. I used to believe that if I tried hard enough, I would be recognized. But the truth is, the harder I tried, the more lost I felt in my own family. A person swimming upstream in the tide that swept away Lily's name. I'll never forget what happened a few years ago. It was the first time I'd been invited to speak at a major journalism conference, a rare opportunity to share my investigative projects. I'd prepared for weeks, rewriting every line, rehearsing countless times, hoping for something groundbreaking. When I told my mother, my heart was waiting for a blessing. Instead, she decided to throw a big party that day to celebrate Lily's official YouTube launch. Relatives, close friends, everyone was invited. And so, no one in my family, except my father, Daniel, showed up for my talk. While I stood on stage looking down at the seats that were sparsely populated with unfamiliar faces, Lily was at home cutting a cake, raising a glass, beaming at the cheering crowd. That night, I didn't grow up. I didn't get any recognition. I just felt like someone had gouged out my heart, leaving a hole that couldn't be filled. From that day on, I began to wonder if I was exaggerating the distance between me and Lily, or if there was something deeper behind it all that I couldn't quite name. Maybe Mom was just instinctively biased. Maybe Lily wasn't doing it on purpose. But the feeling of being overshadowed seemed to grow more pronounced, especially when I realized that Lily always appeared at the right moment to steal the spotlight, as if she had an uncanny instinct for the spotlight. And now, Mom's words at the engagement party, the one that hit me so hard at my pride and dignity, were no longer an accidental stumble, but the last straw. It made it impossible for me to continue pretending that everything was okay. The childhood trauma, which had seemed dormant, now resurfaced violently, drowning me in doubt that everything I had thought was accidental might never have been. For the past few months, my life has been shrouded in a thick fog of unnatural events. At first, they were small, subtle things that I convinced myself were random disasters, the kind of bumps that everyone goes through. But after my mother's cryptic speech at Lily's engagement party, the pieces began to come together, forming a picture that made me shudder. And I realized that I might have been keeping my eyes closed for too long. It started with the cancellation of a major investigative story. It was a project I had been working on for almost a year, collecting data, interviewing dozens of witnesses, cross-referencing every little detail to expose a web of corruption in the construction industry. It was almost done. I could see my name on the front page, the headlines, and the widespread impact of the truth I was about to expose. But then, just days before the story was due to go to press, the editor-in-chief abruptly called me into his office. He said, with a hint of concern, that my main source was no longer considered reliable. There was no debate. The story was canceled. I was stunned. The sources had been verified, the records were clear, the testimony consistent. I knew that. But at the time, I swallowed my anger and considered it a professional setback, even though I still had countless questions. Next was the relationship with Mark, the man I once believed to be my soulmate. 3 years together seemed to be enough to understand each other thoroughly, enough to take the next step. However, Mark began to become cold and distant, as if I had suddenly become a stranger. Then an anonymous text message came to his phone, full of false accusations, slandering me for cheating, dating other people, and taking advantage of my feelings. Mark believed those poisonous words, without asking a single question. His anger burned everything: love, trust, and all the years I had poured out my heart. I didn't understand why someone wanted to destroy my life, and even more so why Mark would trust an anonymous person more easily than the person he had embraced for 3 years. Not long after that, my office was broken into. It was a weekend night and I was absent. When I returned, the door had been forced open, the lock twisted as if it had been through a silent war. Strangely, nothing of value was missing. No laptop, no camera, no money. Only the documents. Notes, drafts, evidence related to the destroyed investigation. All were gone. The police came, filed a report, and classified the incident as petty theft. I told myself that maybe I had misplaced the documents or that someone in the newsroom had borrowed them and not returned them. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Each event, taken individually, could be labeled coincidence. That's how life often is. But when put together, they repeat themselves so coincidentally, so well together that it makes me shudder. And the strangest thing is, Lily, my sister, is always there when disaster strikes. When I was devastated by the canceled article, Lily came to me with sweet words of comfort. When Mark left, she hugged me tightly, whispering that I deserved someone better. After the break-in, Lily offered to help me clean out the office, wiping down every shelf as if she were heartbroken for me. Each time, she gently said, "Don't worry, sister. I'm always here for you." At first, I was touched, genuinely grateful to have such a caring sister, so present at the right moment, as if she knew the pain was coming. But then slowly, that gratitude gave way to doubt. How did Lily always know exactly when I was breaking down? How did she know the article was being canceled minutes after I received it, before I even had time to tell anyone? She called immediately, her voice filled with concern as if she were watching my every move. The timing of her appearances, her words of comfort were so carefully chosen that they were almost calculated. Lily's concern gradually lost its naturalness. It became too perfect, too scripted. I began to feel as if I were living in a carefully choreographed play, one in which I was the central character, unaware. My doubts grew, like an invisible seed planted at some unknown time, now taking root, growing day by day. I still tried to maintain the role of the exemplary older sister, organizing the engagement ceremony, choosing the wedding flowers, writing the speeches. I tried to bury all negative thoughts, reminding myself, this is my sister, my flesh and blood, an indispensable part of my life. But then, the more I tried to push them away, the more I realized that I was touching the surface of something much darker. The successive incidents, the suspicious coincidences, and Lily's strange understanding, all were leading me to a chilling hypothesis. Maybe I was not a victim of fate. Maybe I was the target of a plan, quietly, meticulously laid out, by the very person I still called my sister. After the series of unusual events that had shaken up my otherwise peaceful life, my mind was constantly spinning with a series of questions. A part of me stubbornly denied it, trying to believe that it was all just a coincidence, a series of unrelated events. But the other, stronger and quieter part of me kept urging me to dig deeper, to examine, to find answers to what was gradually being revealed behind the fake peaceful shell. And then a sudden secret phone call, like the last drop of water, turned the fragile doubts into a tangible, spine-chilling fear. It was the day Lily tried on her wedding dress. The room was lit up with laughter, white cloths covered the tables and chairs, and the sweet scent of perfume wafted through the air. Lily, looking like a princess from a fairy tale, was standing in front of the mirror, admiring herself in her thin veil. I sat on the corner of the sofa, a magazine open in my hand, but my eyes never leaving my sister. Suddenly, I saw Lily sneaking out into the hallway, her hand clutching the phone tightly, pressed to her ear as if afraid someone was eavesdropping. Her voice was small, urgent, and full of hidden urgency. Curious, I crept closer, trying to listen to the fragments of conversation that were swallowed up by the long, empty hallway. "She doesn't know anything," Lily whispered, her tone furtive but sure. "Just do as I say. Don't worry, everything will be fine, as long as she doesn't know." My heart felt like it was being squeezed. Who was her? Was it me? And what did "do as I said" mean? A soft clicking sound rang out in my head, like a door that had been locked for a long time was slowly opening, revealing things that I no longer dared to consider coincidences. Before I could explain, Lily turned around. A flash of confusion flashed in her eyes, but only for a moment before her familiar bright smile returned, as if nothing had happened. "What are you doing out here?" Lily asked, her voice a little high and strained. I tried to keep my face calm. "I just came out to get some fresh air. Who are you calling so secretly?" Lily giggled, her eyes sparkling. "Oh, it's just the event planners. They're all fussing, asking all sorts of questions. You know how much a wedding is." The answer sounded innocent, but to me it sounded like a play. The way Lily spoke, the way she controlled her tone, didn't sound like she was talking to a typical wedding planner. It sounded like an order, like someone behind the scenes directing it. I didn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. In that moment, a seed of doubt had quietly taken root. In the days that followed, the image of that phone call kept replaying in my mind, like a broken tape that kept rewinding. I tried to reason, to find a harmless answer, but every analysis led to the same undeniable conclusion. There was something wrong with Lily. Something deeper than her usual sweetness, deeper than her smile that was always ready to soothe others. A few days later, I decided to visit my grandmother Clara in Evanston, the only woman in my family I felt safe turning to. She was wise and always saw things others missed. I told her what had happened, the article being taken down, Mark, the strange incident at the office. I didn't mention Lily, but deep down I hoped she would say something. Something to help me sort through the tangled emotions that were eating away at my thoughts. Clara listened silently, her eyes never leaving me. When I finished, she gently put her teacup down on the table and let out a long, thoughtful sigh. "Emily," she said slowly, but each word was heavy as lead. "That little Lily, she wanted everything for herself since she was a little girl. Toys, attention, compliments. And believe me, if she wants something, she will find a way to get it." She looked at me, her eyes suddenly sharp. "Any way." The words struck me like a cold bolt from the blue. Anything. Those two words rang out in my head like a wake-up call, touching the deepest parts of my memory and emotions. I didn't need her to elaborate. She had seen for a long time what I was slowly coming to see. From that moment on, suspicion was no longer a seed but had taken root and sprouted. I began to look at Lily with different eyes. Her graceful gestures, her sweet hugs, her loving words, all of them suddenly seemed staged. I blamed myself for those thoughts, feeling guilty for doubting the sister who had grown up with me, the one I had held hands with when I was scared, the one I had protected when my friends teased me. But I couldn't ignore the signs that were becoming clearer and clearer. Clara's words were more than a warning. They were confirmation of what I had only dared to think. From that day on, I began to observe Lily more closely. The look in her eyes when someone mentioned me, her slightly too round smile, her small reactions when surprised. I was like an unwilling detective in my own story, following each faint trace to piece together the whole picture. And I knew, no matter how cruel the truth was, there was no turning back. The restaurant where Lily's engagement party was held was a dreamy scene. Soft yellow lights casting shadows on sparkling crystal glasses, warm laughter and chatter, and the enticing aromas of freshly served dishes. It all made for a perfect evening, or at least it seemed that way on the surface. But inside me, a lingering unease was growing, like a cold wind through my clothes at a spring party. I tried to push away vague thoughts about Lily, telling myself that I was just being overly sensitive. This was my sister's big moment, and I, as her older sister, had to support her wholeheartedly, with all my heart. I was chatting with Ethan's sister Sarah about the final details of the ceremony when my eyes caught a familiar face at the back of the room. My heart skipped a beat. It was Mark. Mark. My ex. The one who dumped me after the anonymous, slanderous text messages. He was standing in the corner, a glass of wine in his hand, talking casually to someone whose face I couldn't see. His presence here at this moment was like an unexpected blow. I hadn't heard Lily mention that Mark was coming, nor had I seen his name on any of the guest lists. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Why was Mark there? And why wasn't Lily saying anything? I glanced at Lily. She was laughing and talking with Ethan's friends, but I noticed her eyes flickering over to Mark a few times. A small smile played on her lips, as if she was enjoying some mischievous game when I turned to look at him. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, and walked over to Mark. He saw me too, and the surprise in his eyes was clear. "Mark, what are you doing here?" I asked, my voice tight, trying to sound as casual as possible. Mark was slightly embarrassed. Um, mm, I was invited by Lily. She said she wanted me to hang out with Ethan's friends," he replied, his eyes slightly averted, his voice not entirely confident. Just then, Lily came over and hooked her arm around mine like we were the closest sisters in the world. "Emily, what a surprise, huh? I think Mark will be so happy to see everyone, especially you," she said, her smile still on, but there was something in her voice that made me shiver. A well-disguised fake. "He's here to meet some of Ethan's close friends. They used to work together." That explanation sounded reasonable, but somehow I still felt like everything was off. Ethan and Mark had worked together? When I was still in love with Mark, I had never heard him mention it. And why was it Lily who invited him, and not Ethan himself? I stood still and watched as Lily and Mark continued their conversation. What puzzled me most was that Mark was clearly very familiar with Ethan's group of friends, even more so than I was. He laughed, joked, and shook hands warmly as if he had been part of the group all along. But I, the bride's sister, suddenly felt out of place. A question suddenly popped into my head. Was there a connection between Mark and Lily that I had never suspected, even when I was in love with him? My unease was rising in waves, like an undercurrent beneath the surface of a lake. Though I tried to push it aside and focus on my role as Lily's support, the unusual details piled up, like small pebbles thrown into calm water, creating countless disturbing ripples. Mark's presence, Lily's eyes, Mark's overly familiarity with Ethan's friends, all of it suggested a series of vague but haunting clues. I began to piece it all together. The article I had worked so hard on was canceled. The relationship with Mark had collapsed because of hidden messages. My office had been broken into without any apparent loss. And now Mark's strange presence at a private party, invited by Lily herself. Could it all be coincidence? Or were they the links of a hidden plot set up by my sister? I was torn apart. Part of me didn't want to believe, couldn't believe that Lily, the sister I had loved so much, could be behind the pain I had suffered. But on the other hand, each small detail, like a crack in a mirror, slowly emerged, revealing a bitter truth. That night in the quiet hotel room, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Images of Lily and Mark, the glances they exchanged, the quiet smiles, continued in my mind, like missing pieces of a dark puzzle that was slowly taking shape. I had a feeling that something terrible was quietly approaching, and this time I couldn't look away. Lily's wedding day finally arrived. I took a deep breath, trying to suppress the lingering doubts that still smoldered like unquenched ashes. Despite my instincts warning me, I tried to convince myself that this was my sister's day. The day she deserved to shine. To be completely happy, without a shadow of doubt hanging over her gorgeous white dress. I put on my tailored bridesmaid dress and forced a smile for the cameras, even though inside I was a mess. Lily looked like a princess, but I could see the tension in her eyes. She was so meticulous about every detail, from the arrangement of flowers to the placement of chairs, that anything that went wrong was immediately corrected with a scowl I had rarely seen. When I handed Lily the family necklace, a precious piece of jewelry Clara had kept for her bride, she frowned. "I don't think I'll wear this, Emily. It doesn't match my wedding dress," Lily said, her voice indifferent, and quickly set the item down on the table as if it were an unnecessary decoration. In that moment, I felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over me. The necklace was not just a piece of jewelry, but a bond that had connected generations of family. A symbol that carried stories, memories, and respect. Lily's dismissive dismissal of it made me feel like a piece of history had been buried, dismissed as an insignificant distraction. The wedding reception was solemn and glamorous. After the toasts and the first dance, it was time for the family members to give speeches. Father Daniel opened with warm words about love, patience, and forgiveness. Then, Olivia's mother walked onto the stage, microphone in hand, her eyes slowly scanning the waiting audience. I didn't know why my heart suddenly started to beat faster, as if something was lurking behind that peaceful appearance. Ladies and gentlemen, Mom began, her voice low and firm. Today is a happy day for our family, the day Lily and Ethan officially embark on a new journey. She paused, her eyes on Lily, then suddenly on me. I caught my breath. In life, no one is perfect, and sometimes hurt comes from the people you least expect. The room was silent, as if someone had just sucked all the air out of it. Lily sat up straight, her eyes fixed on her mother warily. Ethan turned to her, his gaze unreadable. Over the years, Mom continued, her voice dropping, there have been things happening in our family that I've tried to hide. Misunderstandings, losses, and destructive behavior. Not from the outside, but from within. She took a deep breath. I was wrong. I tried to protect someone, shield them, not realizing that the cover-up only made the wound bigger and more insidious. Mom looked at Lily again, then back at me, her eyes filled with obvious remorse. I'm sorry, Emily. I've known for a long time that Lily, out of sheer jealousy, was deliberately sabotaging your career and your relationships. The anonymous text messages to Mark, the slanderous emails to the paper, the stolen documents, they were all Lily's doing. The room fell silent. Murmurs began to spread like a tidal wave. I was struck by lightning, even though I had been skeptical. Hearing my mother say it in front of the entire audience still left me breathless. I turned to look at Lily. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with horror, her hands shaking as she held Ethan's, who was now looking at me with a silent, disbelieving gaze. Tears fell from my eyes, not from pain, but from a sense of release, like I had just broken free from an invisible prison that had held me for so long. Lily jumped up, her voice cracking with fear and anger. Mom, what are you talking about? Are you crazy? She screamed, panicking, causing the auditorium to fall into chaos. Ethan tried to hold her back while Daniel rushed over to support Olivia, who was shaking with emotion. In the midst of the chaos, something dawned on me. Lily's panicked, frightened reaction, her hasty denial, was the clearest evidence of the truth. She had done it. She had deliberately ruined my life. A chill ran down my spine, but at the same time, a fire burned inside me. I couldn't stay here. Couldn't live on lies polished with ribbons and scented candles. I turned and walked away from the banquet hall amidst stunned stares and whispers that poured down like a downpour on the broken wedding. But at that moment, I was no longer a victim. I would rise from the rubble to claim justice for myself, and I knew from that moment on I would not stop. Leaving the wedding party in chaos and half-blinking stares, I felt like I had been ripped from a luxurious dream that had rotted from within. A fierce emotion was released in my chest, a mixture of pain, anger, and a sense of betrayal that reached to the core. But this time, instead of letting it consume me, I let it become a fire that drove me down a path of no return. I would find the truth. I would not let Lily continue to hide what she had done in the dark. The next morning, I sprang into action, as if I would falter if I were an hour late. The first person I called was Ethan's older sister, Sarah. Sarah was smart, sharp, and honest, and I knew she would be devastated by what she had witnessed. When I called, Sarah immediately agreed to meet. We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe tucked away on a side street, away from the noise and prying eyes of her family. I still can't believe Lily did what she did, Sarah breathed, her voice still shaking slightly, as if she were dealing with the aftershocks of an earthquake. I thought she was just a little controlling, but I never imagined the extent. I told Sarah everything, my growing doubts, the unusual events of the past few months, and Clara's vague but persistent warnings. Sarah listened attentively without interrupting, her eyes alternating between doubt, anger, and pain. I can help you, she said after a pause. I suspected Lily for a long time, but I had no concrete evidence. Until one day I discovered a secret social media account she used to chat with strangers. I secretly took screenshots and saved messages. I thought you might need it. I felt my heart skip a beat. A secret account? It could be the missing link. Sarah quickly forwarded me a file full of screenshots, documenting every conversation, every post, every tiny scratch in the mask Lily had worn all this time. I began to read. Each message was like a dull blade, not cutting once, but slowly slicing into my memory and trust. In posts and messages, Lily spread false rumors about me, sending them to newsrooms and colleagues, destroying my reputation and getting a major investigative story scrapped because of editorial doubts. The messages were as cold as steel. Just make them doubt Emily's source, and then she'll never know who's behind it. I scrolled down and saw the anonymous messages to Mark. They were full of accusations. I was unfaithful, I was using him. I was only in a relationship for personal gain. Emily only dates people of status to get information for her articles. She's seeing someone else. He sees. My heart sank. Lily hadn't just ruined my career. She'd destroyed the fragile emotional foundation I'd worked so hard to build with Mark. But what really froze me was the discovery that Lily had dug into my past. A past I'd thought safe, locked away in an old high school diary, buried deep in the bottom of a box under my bed. Innocent entries about dreams, early traumas, secrets I'd never told anyone, now quoted in the messages with chilling precision. Lily had read them, memorized them, and used them to manipulate my present life. It wasn't a betrayal. It was a brutal invasion of my core. From shock, I moved to sanity. I began to systematize everything. Every piece of evidence, every detail, every punctuation mark was organized into a digital database. Screenshots, text messages, anonymous links, everything carefully backed up and encrypted. I understood that this fight was no longer personal. This was a fight against manipulation, against sugar-coated lies. Lily's actions were not limited to me. Some of the messages suggested that she was also trying to drive a wedge between Ethan and his associates, sowing doubt about his character and abilities. While there had been no concrete consequences, if left unchecked, it was a ticking time bomb. And I, more than anyone, knew the destructive power of doubt. That made me even more determined. I couldn't let anyone else fall victim to me. I was going to see it through. The quest to find the truth and bring it to light was no longer an option, but the only reason I had left to live. With the evidence carefully collected, I knew I could no longer continue to watch in silence. It was time to confront it. Not only to confirm the truth, but also to look directly at the slowly spreading cracks in relationships that had once seemed solid. The first person I chose to confront was Mark, the man who had been my whole world, and now the victim of an elaborate lie. We met again at the old coffee shop where we had shared our sweetest days. Now the atmosphere was tense and unfamiliar. Mark looked haggard, his face tired. I didn't beat around the bush, placing before him the file full of anonymous messages that Sarah had provided, evidence that Lily had been systematically sabotaging our relationship. Mark read each message, his face growing paler. His eyes reflected a painful mix of anger, regret, and profound helplessness. "I couldn't believe it," he said quietly, his voice choking. "Lily, she told me you were cheating, that you were only seeing me for your career. She said you were traveling with a male colleague all the time and that you were spending too much time with him." Then the anonymous messages started coming in. I believed it. My heart broke. "You believed her without asking me?" I asked, my voice choked with both pain and anger. Mark nodded, eyes downcast, silent. "I know. I was stupid. I felt so betrayed, and Lily always showed up with the proof. I'm sorry, Emily. I really am." His confession was like a slow knife that pierced my heart, not only because our love had been distorted and destroyed, but also because Lily, my sister, had cruelly exploited the weakness of others to manipulate everything to her liking. She turned Mark into a tool to serve her evil plans, sowing doubts and shattering the trust that I once held as a treasure. After my meeting with Mark, I realized something was clear. Lily was involved in more than just my love life. She was deeply involved in my work, my career, and my reputation. I decided to reach out to a former colleague, someone who had worked with me on the editorial team, someone I trusted and hoped still had some memory of the anomaly when my article was rejected from publication. We met on a lightly raining afternoon. When I mentioned the incident, she frowned, clearly remembering something. "I always felt something was fishy," she admitted. "I got an anonymous email right after the article was canceled, saying you had used fake sources and made up the whole story. I didn't believe it at first, but then the editors seemed to take it as fact." She handed me a copy of the email. As soon as I read it, I was almost certain. The phrasing, the choice of words, even the punctuation. It was all Lily's signature. Though unsigned, the spirit of the writer was clear. Not only had she sent the email to the editor, but Lily had also been quietly spreading false information to every link in the environment where I had worked, distorting my image bit by bit. Mark's story and the revelations from my former colleague were a wake-up call. Lily was not simply a jealous or hurt sister. She had acted purposefully, strategically, and was willing to undermine anyone who stood in her way. She operated like a skillful puppeteer, pulling the strings of every person in my life to create a perfect drama, where she was pitied and celebrated, and I was gradually pushed aside. I was no longer just a victim. I was a witness to the destruction of someone I once loved. Part of me wanted to expose it all now. But another, quieter part of me wanted to understand the root cause. What had made Lily this way? Was it childhood wounds, a sense of abandonment, or a simmering hatred that had never been named? I knew that confronting Lily directly was not enough. I needed to trace the unhealed wounds of the past to find the true roots of this toxicity. Only then could I break the cycle of lies and manipulation that had plagued my family. After gathering all the evidence and confronting Mark and his former colleague, I still had one lingering question. Why would Lily do all this? The rivalry might just be on the surface. I sensed something deeper was stirring, an old wound that had never really healed, seeping through the family like an unnamed underground stream. I decided to reach out to my father, Daniel, a man who was always so calm, almost cold, who spoke little about the past, but I knew he was the only key that could unlock the old door to the source of all the hurt. I found him in his familiar office, where the scent of old books and coffee always mingled like a memory. My father was reading the newspaper, his glasses perched on the bridge of his nose. When I entered, he slowly removed his glasses and folded the newspaper, as if he had known this conversation would come. I told him everything. Sarah's testimony, Mark's painful confession, the anonymous email to a former colleague, and Clara's veiled warning about Lily, always wanting everything to be hers. My father listened quietly. His face did not change, but the thoughtfulness in his eyes made the air seem thick. When I finished, he let out a heavy sigh, as if releasing a secret that had been buried in his heart for decades. "Emily," he said, his voice hoarse and slow, "I'm sorry I couldn't stop it sooner." "But why, Father? Why did Lily become like this? Was it just pure rivalry?" I asked, my voice choked, like a child begging for a piece of the puzzle to make sense of the fractured picture of childhood. My father looked at me, his eyes filled with undisguised pain. "Olivia, your mother, had an older sister named Grace. They had a very complicated relationship. Grace was always the one who stood out. Smart, lively, loved by everyone in the family. Your mother, Olivia, was quieter, more self-pitying, and always felt overshadowed by her older sister." He paused, his eyes staring into space as if looking back through the years. "That favoritism from your grandparents made your mother bitter. She became jealous, losing her sense of right and wrong. Olivia once deliberately got Grace into trouble to get a little attention. I knew about it, but I was too young to understand how serious it was." Daniel's words were like needles piercing my heart. I had never imagined that there was a history of simmering rivalry in our family, nurtured by silence and lack of understanding. My mother, always gentle and a little sad, suddenly appeared in a different light, someone who had been deeply hurt and who had unconsciously spread that hurt to her children. I left my father's house and went to my grandmother, Clara, the only person sane and experienced enough to confirm what I had heard. When I mentioned Grace and Olivia, Clara's eyes became distant. "Oh, Olivia, She always felt inadequate, she said slowly. Grace was bright and energetic. Olivia was shy and withdrawn. The more she was compared, the more she tried to prove herself. But the way she tried to prove herself was wrong. Her voice cracked. Once Grace was selected as a finalist in a drawing contest. She drew for weeks. Then, on the day it was due, her paper got dirty. No one knew why, only Olivia. Later comforted Grace, and her parents praised her for being caring. I was suspicious at the time, but everyone shrugged it off as a small matter. I couldn't help but cry. That story, though it had been covered in dust for years, was a grim counterpart to the present. I suddenly understood. Lily was the continuation of a series of unnamed wounds. My mother's favoritism toward Lily was not out of love, but out of fear. My mother feared that Lily would become the next Olivia, abandoned as she had been. And in her desperate attempt to protect her daughter from feeling inferior, my mother had inadvertently created a new version. More cruel, more dangerous. Lily is not just a selfish person. She is the product of a broken family structure. Each generation tries to right the wrongs of the previous one, but repeats the same mistakes in different forms. More silently, more subtly, and more deeply wounded. I understand that this is no longer just about Lily and me. This is a toxic legacy that needs to be broken. If I don't speak up, if I don't act, then I will become the next link in that cycle of pain. And I can't let that happen. I can't let my children grow up in the shadow of unhealed scars. This is no longer a confrontation, but a journey to heal a family that has been wounded for too long. As the dark patches of my family history began to emerge, I realized that confronting Lily was no longer a personal conflict. It was a mission to break a toxic cycle that had been passed down from generation to generation, a web of hidden hurt, simmering jealousy, and manipulation that weaved like spiderwebs through every relationship. I couldn't let Lily continue to wreak such havoc, especially on Ethan's family, who were completely innocent and didn't deserve to suffer the consequences of our past. The first person I thought of to join me was Ethan's sister, Sarah, who had bravely provided vital clues. I believed that she, more than anyone else, wanted to protect her brother from the unknowing harm that was coming. I made an appointment with Sarah and Ethan's grandmother, Eleanor, a woman of experience, calm, and the soul of the family. In the cozy room where they welcomed me with sincere listening, I told them everything. The evidence about Lily, the fragmented confessions from Mark, the anonymous emails, and even the old memories from conversations with my father and Clara. When I finished, a heavy silence fell. I can't believe Lily would do something like that, Sarah whispered, her eyes flashing with anger and frustration. Ethan has been blind for too long. We can't let her continue to wreak havoc. Eleanor, calmer but no less determined, nodded slowly. We must act, tactfully but firmly. Lily has not only ruined Emily, she could damage Ethan's reputation and business if left unchecked. That desire for control is a danger sign. We sat down and discussed each step. The goal was not only to expose the truth, but also to prevent Lily from using manipulation to manipulate Ethan's work and relationships. We decided to compile all the evidence into a clear, systematic, understandable dossier, something that could not be denied. But Lily would not back down. She called me, her voice trembling like a wounded child. Emily, I don't know what Mom said, but you have to believe me. Mom is not okay. She's depressed, she's imagining things. As she tried to manipulate emotions, to twist the truth, to blame Mom, as if Olivia were just an unstable woman, not a witness to the truth that Lily wanted to hide. That tone, conniving and artificially sweet, made me even more determined. I sought out a trusted attorney to discuss my legal options. I needed to know if I could hold Lily accountable for the misuse of my personal information, for the deliberate lies that had ruined my relationships and my reputation. The attorney listened carefully, taking notes. He said that while maliciously would be difficult to prove in court, spreading false information and invading my privacy could be civilly prosecuted. He advised me to prepare myself for a difficult legal journey if I was serious about pursuing justice. I left the lawyer's office with mixed feelings, not because I wanted revenge. I never wanted to hurt Lily the way she had hurt me. What I wanted was the truth, justice, protection of the innocent who deserved to live in the light, not in a carefully crafted drama. I didn't want Sarah's life, Eleanor's life, or Ethan's life, the life I once loved, to be twisted by someone who craved control. As we prepared to act, the tension began to rise. Sarah proposed that we should tell the truth at a big family party, where everyone would be there, no room to duck, no words could be distorted when everyone heard. It would be a direct blow, but also the only chance to break the web of lies Lily had spun for so long. I hesitated, then nodded. I knew that this day would change everything. It would be the moment of no return. But I also knew it was time to take off the mask. I was filled with dread, but also with an unprecedented sense of relief. Finally, the truth would speak. Christmas Eve fell. A light snowfall blanketed the affluent Chicago neighborhood, where Ethan's family mansion glowed like a fairy tale castle. Twinkling yellow lights hugged the trees on the porch, and classical music wafted through the ornately decorated rooms. The scents of cinnamon, gingerbread, and wine blended together, painting a picture of warmth and breathtaking perfection. But for me, Emily, it was not a night of celebration. It was a night of confrontation, of harsh truths coming to light, and afterward, nothing would be the same. I stood beside Sarah and Eleanor, our hands cold but clasped together. In front, Lily and Ethan were greeting the guests, Lily's face beaming as if everything was going well. The way she smiled, the way she linked arms with Ethan so sweetly, it all made me shiver. How could a person be so fake? Olivia's mother and Daniel's father were there, their faces still weary from the tumultuous engagement party. When dinner was over and everyone was seated, Eleanor stood up gently, tapping her wine glass to get everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said in a commanding, weighty voice, "before we continue this Christmas evening, we have something important to share with you." I took a deep breath, reaching for the bottom of my lungs. Sarah held my hand tighter. On the big screen at the back of the room, connected to my laptop, were all the things we'd prepared. Text messages between Lily and Mark, anonymous emails to the newsroom, and excerpts from the personal diary I'd once believed to be private. Sarah spoke first. "We have uncovered a number of serious facts regarding Lily and Emily's relationship," she said, her voice clear and strong. "We believe everyone in the family has a right to know." I began to slide the evidence piece by piece. The room, which had been buzzing, fell into absolute silence. Faces went from curious to stunned, then shocked. Each message, each note that appeared on the screen was like a cold knife. Proof of what Lily had done secretly to destroy my reputation and my life. I detailed every detail. How Lily fabricated stories of emotional betrayal, how she accused me of professional fraud, all in an attempt to push me into the dark side so she could keep the spotlight for herself. Lily paled. She jumped up from her chair, her voice cracking. "It's not true. It's all lies. Emily made it up to get back at me." But her words were unconvincing, trembling and desperate. Then Sarah showed a final clip, a drunken Lily talking to a friend. "I did everything I could to keep Emily from surpassing me. She was always the darling of her mother, the one praised by everyone else. I had to keep her down to keep her front and center." The voice, mocking, jealous, venomous, revered through the breathless room. I sent Mark texts, made up stories about her cheating. I sent anonymous emails to the newspaper, costing her her job. I had to win, no matter what. When the video ended, the room was quiet. A few soft sobs could be heard. Ethan remained seated, eyes glued to the screen, his face frozen. Then he slowly stood up, looking at Lily, his eyes filled with quiet brokenness. "Lily," he said, his voice eerily quiet, "I can't believe you would do this. I trusted you. I loved you. But you lied to me, hurt Emily, and hurt our family. I can't take this anymore." He looked at his parents, then back at Lily. "I'm calling off the engagement." The statement fell like a knife straight through Lily's heart. She collapsed into a chair, sobbing. My mother, pale and shaking, couldn't take her eyes off her daughter. Father Daniel rushed to catch her as screams, crashes, and tears filled the room. a shattered family portrait. I stood still in the chaos, feeling as if a huge boulder had been lifted from my chest. The truth had finally come to light. It was painful, it was tearful, but it was necessary. I felt relieved and devastated. I hurt for my family, for Ethan, and for Lily, the sister who had lost herself to jealousy. A chapter closed, but the scars remained. I knew this was only the beginning of a long journey, a journey of healing, of forgiveness, of starting over from the ashes. Christmas Eve ended like a velvet curtain falling after a long play, where the truth about Lily rang like a final bell, ending all the fake roles. In that moment, all illusions about family, about love, were shattered without warning. Ethan, despite his broken heart and dizzy spirit, still chose to face reality. He resolutely ended his relationship with Lily, not just breaking off the engagement, but completely severing all ties, both in private life and work. His family stood behind him like a solid wall, at the same time expressing deep sympathy for me, the one who told the truth. As for me, Emily began the process of rebuilding my reputation and my life, which had been buried under lies. I sent all the evidence I had collected to the editor-in-chief, along with a letter detailing the incident, without evasion or prevarication. At first, they were hesitant, but then the sharpness of the facts and the confirmation from former colleagues made it impossible to deny. The investigative article that had been silently dismissed was restored, and when it was published, it created a huge buzz. Not only did I win a prestigious journalism award, but I also regained what was most important: confidence in my own worth and the profession I loved. Lily, after all, collapsed. At first, she still tried to struggle, deny, blame, create new scenarios to cover up the old. But the undeniable evidence, combined with Ethan's cold rejection, left her with nowhere to turn. She moved to Los Angeles, away from the scrutiny, and began therapy. I don't know the specifics of the process, only that a few months later, a letter arrived in my hand. In it, Lily confessed everything. She admitted that blind jealousy, fear of being overshadowed, and lack of love had caused her to slide down. It was a real apology. No excuses, no embellishments. And even though the wound inside me had not healed, I felt like a part of the burden had been lifted. Lily had finally looked in the mirror. I also began to establish new boundaries with Olivia's mother. She was no longer the proud, domineering mother she had been after the incident. She was painfully aware of the costs of favoritism and silent protection. I don't blame her, but I needed space to heal. Our first conversations were awkward, but they gradually became more honest. We talked about the past, about the invisible cracks, and about the hope of rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of understanding, not illusions. My personal life also changed in ways I never expected. I bought a small apartment in a quiet area on the edge of the city, a balcony overlooking a park where mornings began with peace and sunshine. There, I began a new relationship with a colleague in the same field, a man who was not overwhelmed by success or intimidated by my intellect, but simply appreciated me for who I was. Our relationship was built on respect, dialogue, and listening, things I had never had the opportunity to fully experience before. I realized that justice is not about punishment, nor is it about gloating when others fall. True justice is about being true to yourself, no longer controlled by toxic psychological legacies, no longer letting the ghosts of the past guide your every choice. It is about standing firm in the light, even when it exposes the deepest darkness within you. I am no longer the woman who suffered in silence. I stood up, spoke up, and acted. I broke the cycle of silence and lies that has lasted for generations, not just for me, but for those who came after me. It was not an easy path, but it made me a different person, stronger, freer, and ultimately happier. After all the ups and downs, my life has finally found a peaceful anchor. Although the scars of the past still exist like underground streams in my memory, I have learned to walk with them, no longer running away, but letting them be the driving force that drives me forward. One of the most important decisions I have ever made is refusing to get myself involved in a legal vortex with Lily. My lawyer has prepared every file, every strategy, but I know that the more I drag this fight, the deeper I will dig into the wound that is trying to heal, for both me and for her. Instead of retaliating, I choose to turn towards the light, towards my own future. My family is still struggling to find their way out of the darkness. My mother, Olivia, is still haunted by the guilt and regret that gnaw at us every day. The conversations between us have become less cold. The silences have begun to be filled with sincerity. But trust, something fragile and difficult to mend, needs time to regenerate. My father, Daniel, quietly acts as a mediator, mending every small crack. Although the relationship within my biological family is still fragile, I have found another family where I can be myself, where I am listened to and loved unconditionally. Clara, with her experience and tolerance, has become my warm support. Sarah, my indispensable companion in the journey to find the truth, is now a true sister. And then new friends, colleagues I love, have woven a close circle around me, strong and full of trust. To mark this new chapter, I decided to host a small gathering at my new apartment in Chicago. No frills, no fuss. Just a cozy party where I invited the people who really mattered in my life. Clara, Sarah, Ethan, and a few close friends came. No pomp, no empty words. Just intimacy, genuine smiles, and stories told from the heart. I raised my glass, the light from the window reflecting on the faces of my loved ones, smiling at me. I want to raise a glass, I said, my voice catching in my throat. To the truth, to the courage to face it. And to all my sincere relationships, the people who believed in me, supported me, and accompanied me through the storm. The glasses clinked together, eyes filled with sharing and love. In that moment, a deep peace came over me. There was a time when I was caught in a race of competition and validation. I thought my worth lay in proving that I was better than Lily, that I was more worthy of love and attention. But now I understand. My worth lies not in comparison, but in facing the truth, breaking toxic patterns and walking the path of my own choosing, the path of kindness and peace. My story doesn't end with a spectacular revenge or a glorious victory. It ends with a simple truth. Facing the truth, no matter how cruel, is the first step on the journey to healing. It is the most courageous thing we can do for ourselves and for those we love. Only by looking directly at the darkness of our past can we truly let go and begin to live a different life, one built on honesty, on unconditional love. I chose the truth, and with it, freedom. And that perhaps is the bravest thing I have ever done. Thank you for listening to my story.